It's time, Fort Wayne. Your sports, your station. It's the Sports Rush with Brett Rump.
Max Landis.
Covering all the topics that hit a nerve here in the Summit City.
Clark goes 11 yards, touchdown.
Only on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Now here's your host, Brett Rump.
The greatest, most interesting, most important person of all time.
You are incredible.
Older than white.
Yeah, well, you're half right.
What is this, amateur hour?
This is going to be huge.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
That boy ain't right.
The simplest way to put it, I have problems.
Welcome to the alleged show.
Y'all ready for this?
Thank God it's...
Here we go, taking you home into a sports weekend. It is the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix, 4 to 6. I am Brett Rump along with Adam Lundy. We've got your text line, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line, available for your questions, comments, or suggestions, 260-447-8500. Packed hour coming up, including Pat Boylan, the radio host of Pacers basketball, also the TV play-by-play for the Indiana Fever, and we'll talk about both coming up with Pat Boylan in just a few minutes. So here we are heading to girls basketball semi-state, and of course we focused on the games we're going to be broadcasting, so you've heard us talking about Norwell Delta, Columbia City Highland, because that's where we will be. Now, it certainly doesn't mean we're ignoring the fact that Whitko Eastside have made it into a 2A semi-state game tomorrow morning. Also, Warsaw will take on McCutcheon at noon at Frankfort. Whitko not only wins their first sectional, but then they go on and win their first regional, and so they're appearing in their first semi-state. Eastside with a 26-1 record, making their second semi-state appearance. But it's been a long time since they made the first. I think it was 1979.
You said it last time they were regional champions. It was 1979. They played at Northrop.
So that is a early game. So one of those two will be playing at night with Whitko Eastside scheduled to tip off at 10 a.m. at Logansport in the Berry Bowl.
Felix the Cat.
Yeah, been there a number of times. It's about an hour and 10-minute trip. Shoot, right there.
Awesome.
Also, you've got at Huntington North, which that's really nice because that's kind of a short stop before you get all the way to Logansport.
Yeah.
Norwell Delta will be on the air just a minute or two before 10 a.m., bring you the play-by-play of the Norwell Knights and the Delta Eagles, and then Game 2 at Huntington North will tip at noon between the Columbia City Eagles and the Highland Trojans. That game... I expect that both of these games will have any 8 teams making it to the championship.
Yep, that's what we've predicted. That's what we've kind of come to expect, just looking at the resume of both of our area teams that will be competing at Huntington North tomorrow.
We'll break these games down much more coming up tonight on the Parkview Sports Medicine High School Basketball postgame show, which takes place after Mastodons basketball tonight, because we'll be at the Gate Center with the play-by-play of the Mastodons versus Oakland, a game with major implications on the potential conference standings and ultimate Horizon League Barbasol championships. And so this is huge tonight because Oakland comes into play really one game back in the loss column to the Mastodons. So it's almost a must-win for Purdue Fort Wayne at the Gate Center starting at 7 o'clock. We'll be on the air with the pregame starting at 6:45. Well, we talked about last night. All eyes were on the TV, and it wasn't just a figment of our imagination. It was reality. The numbers are in, and they're pretty darn impressive in what the NHL was able to attract last night.
Yeah, I have the numbers here right for you, Brett. ESPN averaged 9.252 million viewers for last night's Canada-United States Championship game. It is the most watched non-Olympic hockey game on record in the United States. And across the United States and Canada, last night's game drew 16.1 million viewers, nearly matching last year's Stanley Cup Final Game 7 viewership of 16.3 million, so only 0.2 million less than that.
Also, with the day that spring training games got underway, Major League Baseball announced that their relationship with ESPN is coming to an end. Yesterday, it was announced that the $550 million yearly rights fees were apparently too expensive. So in 2026, baseball will be off the network for good. Now, I wonder, of course, ESPN is all in right now on the NBA, where they pay $2.6 billion a year for their NBA coverage. And I wonder if they're wanting to commit more to the NBA, because the NBA plays up until June. And with Major League Baseball starting in late March, you do have a lot of overlap. But, there is something else that's on the table that ESPN might be going all in on. And that's the WNBA. And I wonder if that's the direction that ESPN wants to go. They might have seen some type of a loophole to get out of this contract that they've got with Major League Baseball, and they've mutually agreed to end the contract at the end of this year, which means the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, no more after this season.
Yeah, it's, like it says, you follow the money trail, and this, of course, all comes down to money, and ESPN feels like they don't want to pay that much for what they're paying to put on baseball on their program. Something that I read is that ESPN is still open to pursuing a deal with a reduced rights fee after seeing deals struck by the MLB with Apple and Roku. Apple pays about $85 million per season for their Friday night MLB games they've aired since 2022. And Roku's deal for Sunday afternoon games is worth about $10 million per year. Unfortunately, MLB thought that this whole, wanting to invest less money in the MLB is just not consistent what they bring to the platform. So that's why there's no deal with this ending.
Well, there might be a situation where ESPN decides they want to keep Sunday Night Baseball, but all this cost of a studio show and everything else that they're running, they may want to back out of. But how many years? Sunday Night Baseball's been an institution for a long time on ESPN, so I'm surprised they wouldn't try to at least negotiate some type of salvation on Sunday nights where they at least keep a game every week. But again, what would it cost them to own the rights to just one night a week? And is that going to be worth it? But I think for ESPN, they were committing a lot of airtime with studio shows and time they were committing during SportsCenter and of course the games and then double headers. They were committing a lot of broadcast time to Major League Baseball, and I think they're looking at it saying the WNBA is the place to be, and right now we don't have enough airtime to be competitive to go out and get a major lucrative deal with the WNBA. What was the network last year that had the WNBA? Some network that I'd never even heard of had the Friday night games.
I don't know. I don't even remember.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it was buried somewhere, and ESPN probably would be a welcome partner because they already have such an invested relationship with the NBA.
Was it Ion?
Ion, that's it.
Yeah. Shout out to Ion. I actually appreciate the fact that I can pick them up with a digital antenna.
Yeah, so I learned the channel Ion exists during the WNBA season last year. And every year in March, I realize that there's True TV still on the dial somewhere when they get some of the March Madness games.
Oh, I'm so ready for those to not be on True TV or TBS. But, hey, you got to watch them where they are.
It is what it is, man.
I guess.
So last night, were you among those that were watching hockey?
No, I was watching the New York Knicks take on the Chicago Bulls in some NBA action.
Knicks Bulls?
Hey, it was a good game. It went to overtime.
Really?
Yeah.
I was going to say Knicks probably won that by double digits.
No, we were without Josh Hart and OG Anunoby last night. Still managed to get the win though, so that's good.
Is that at home or on the road?
It was at Madison Square Garden, so electrified the fans and good win over the Bulls.
Well, I'll tell you who had a good win last night was the Indiana Pacers with a 127-113 win over the Memphis Grizzlies. Heartbreak for John Conchar last night, who got in all of 2 minutes.
Oh man, that really stinks too.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see some more Conch.
Yeah, he got I think the last 2 minutes of the game he came in.
Hey, he was a +4 in 2 minutes of play, so I'm gonna give that a good thumbs up there.
Yeah, if you prorate that over a 48-minute game, that's a plus 96. That's doing your job.
That's impacting the game.
Yeah, it was not a great night for John Morant.
No.
4 for 15 from the field, 0 for 3 from 3, finished with just 12 points and was minus 11. A lot of that was because of the defense of Andrew Nembhard. But the Pacers, what's impressive is a couple of areas where they are not known to be real good. They actually did well last night against a really good offensive team. In fact, Memphis is what, number 2 in the league in scoring, number 1, number 2. They were averaging like 123 a game, and so they might have been number 1 in the NBA in scoring.
They are currently 123.1 points per game.
Yeah, and so it's an impressive win for the Pacers to hold Memphis to 113 and also to match them on the glass. You've got guys like Jaren Jackson, Zach Edey. You've got some guys that will get after it on the boards.
Oh, yeah.
And the Pacers and Grizzlies both with 46 total rebounds. So the Pacers did the job on the glass as well.
Zach Edey, 3-point attempts last night for the big man, and he hit one.
Yeah. Well, he got into a game of horse with Miles Turner.
Yeah.
Trying to answer Miles Turner. It's like, if you can do it, I can do it. I'm going to Miles Turner ended up 3 for 9. So percentage-wise, Zach Edey was right there with him.
Right there with him. Let's see, how many rebounds for Turner? 10. You can live with 10 rebounds for Miles.
10 rebounds for Miles Turner. Well, what was more impressive is he had 7 block shots.
That's huge.
A big night for Miles.
Yeah. 7 blocks.
Yeah, enjoy it, because that'll be the end of that for a few weeks.
He's like, I did my job now.
Yeah. Got some rest before the game, because they had the week off, and
got my blocks average up. So hey, we're sitting pretty.
Good. Yeah. Rebounds, I proved that I can do it. And you wonder, you'd love to see Miles Turner have this kind of final third of the season. But you wonder what pressure he's been under and how that affects his play on the court, always being speculated to be moving or traded.
Just constant trade fodder is Miles Turner.
Yep.
Just sweating the deadline every year.
Yep. It's all different teams for different guys. And do the Pacers want to keep him? Do they, and so everybody weighs in, and that only adds to some of the discussion. It's got to be somewhat difficult for Miles Turner. But last night, with that freedom of knowing he's not going anywhere, he was still only 5 of 17 from the field, which has to be a little better.
Yeah.
But 17 points, 10 rebounds, 7 block shots for Miles Turner. Tyrese Halliburton was 4 for 11 from distance and added 9 assists.
There you go, 22 and 9.
Not bad. All right, we'll take a timeout here coming up in a minute. Just a reminder, tonight's special programming, we've got the Mastodons taking on the Oakland Golden Grizzlies. Huge matchup in the Horizon League standings as we count down to the final 3 games of the regular season. And we'll be on the air at 6:45 with the pregame show. 7 o'clock will be the tip. And yes, tonight's game is at the Gates Center on the campus of Purdue Fort Wayne. And then after the game, that means it's a quick hop, skip, and a jump over to the Canterbury Pizza Hut, where we'll have the Parkview Sports Medicine high school basketball postgame show. Scores of area boys action tonight and a preview of girls semi-state basketball coming up tomorrow. That will be live at the Canterbury Pizza Hut. About 9:15, we'll get that show underway. And, of course, not only the Comets in action at home all weekend, you've got who else is on the list of bonus scores for tonight? You've got the Mastodons.
You've got Mastodons.
And you've got, Michigan State, an intriguing battle for supremacy in the Big Ten.
We can follow along with that one, too, for our friends to the north.
Yep. All right, but all that's coming up at 9:15 at 10:30. It's Bob Lovell and Indiana Sports Talk right here at 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM. Now, tomorrow, Jay Delsing, Golf with Jay Delsing,
early,
is moving up to 7 a.m. because at 10 a.m. we've got the girls' basketball.
Hey, get the golf in before your tea time.
And Jim Shevlin will be talking sports tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 9:56 a.m.
If you have a tea time tomorrow, I'm sorry, don't do it.
You really think people are golfing? No, it's a show to listen to.
I'm just being a goober.
It's not instructional. It's not like, okay, now address the ball.
I'm just saying we're playing it early, get it in before those Saturday tee times. But if you're playing during this weather, just go find an indoor. I
just say don't use a white ball.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, lost ball.
You'd lose them anyway. It doesn't matter if there's snow.
Yeah, really. You can lose them in the woods, too, believe me. Or you can put them in the drink. That's always a tough place.
Oh, splash.
Oh, it's the reason I don't play that game much anymore.
I watch golf, and I watch even some of the professionals get stuck and have some of the worst shots I've ever seen, going from bunker to bunker like that. And I just think to myself, I could never play this sport. I would have to constantly buy new clubs because they'd be getting snapped in half.
We'll take a break. We'll come back. We got Pat Boylan on the other side. It is the Sports Rush Friday edition on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. 260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line, 260-447-8500. Back on the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix, 4 to 6. And we are joined now on our guest line, the play-by-play voice of the Indiana Fever, the pregame, postgame, midday host for the Indiana Pacers, Pat Boylan, guy that you hear on the radio right here at 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. He joins us, and first of all, Pat, it's been a while since we've talked to you. Thank you, and happy Friday to you.
Yeah, Brett, it's good to be back, and we appreciate everybody who listens to us regularly, watches, hopefully comes down, if possible, from the Fort Wayne area. It's an area that I've got a lot of family, and I'm very fond of, so it's always good to be back on with you.
And so we got to talk about the Fever before we get into the Pacers. There's plenty of things to talk about the Pacers, but the Fever have been pretty active over the last couple of weeks. And, we're kind of learning the WNBA rules as we go because the league is evolving, it's changing, it's growing. But the free agency, which all of a sudden the Fever are very actively a part of this year, it's going to be a new look roster when things roll around in May.
Yeah, no question. I was just thinking back recently to where this franchise was 2 years ago to the date where they are now. I mean, it's just impossible to fathom what we've seen over the last 2 years. A couple years ago, the Fever were coming off a 5-31 season. They knew they were going to have the number one pick in the draft, but they didn't even know if Aaliyah Boston was going to come out. And that's before talking Caitlin Clark. That's before talking any of the free agency movement that has been made. At that point 2 years ago, the Fever did not have a single All-Star on the roster, and now they can boast a starting five, which includes 5 of the league's top 30 scorers from a year ago, and all 5 of those players have made an All-Star team, and the only one of those 5 players that has not made an All-Star team twice or more in her career is Caitlin Clark, and that's because she's played just one season. So, first of all, the dramatic turnaround the franchise has seen in the last 2 years. It's almost impossible to put into words. And this offseason, I would say the Fever easily had the best free agency period of any team in the WNBA. DeWanna Bonner is a 6-time All-Star and a 2-time champion. She comes in, will bring a ton of experience, but even at age 37, she's been an All-Star each of the last 2 years. So this isn't a player that, was great 4 or 5 years ago and is now at the twilight of her career. She's certainly closer to the end than the beginning, but she's still playing at an extremely high level. Despite being in her upper 30s, Natasha Howard's a player that the Fever actually drafted back in 2014. At that point, they were competing for a championship and moved her in a deal to try to get some more experience for Tamika Catching's last couple of hurrahs. And so feels fitting, kind of a full circle moment for her to come back. She's a 2-time All-Star and a 3-time champion. And so when you add those 2 players to a couple of what I think will be key bench acquisitions, Sophie Cunningham, a really good 3-and-D player, Sydney Colson, who's a veteran point guard, and Brianna Turner, who is a veteran defensive big. But when you add those 2 kind of big splashes of Howard and Bonner to a roster that has 3 All-Stars as is, and you would like to hope and think that the Caitlin Clarks and the Aaliyah Boston, certainly of the world, those young players are due for a step forward this season. It's tantalizing to think what they're capable of. When your best player is still just 23 years old, there's going to have to be probably some patience there still. But in my opinion, the Fever have jettisoned themselves into the title conversation. I would not say they're favorites, but I would say they're in the conversation And I would say they've got the type of roster capable that if things broke their way next year, you never know.
When you look back on kind of the first move that was made, it was a change of coaches from Christy Sides to Stephanie White. And Christy Sides, I don't think there was a question. She got better as the year went on last year. I thought that the team got better as the year went on last year, but I'm not sure that other players would have bought into this being a championship team with Christy Sides as the head coach as much as they buy in with Stephanie White. Am I right?
Well, I think it's undoubtedly correct that Stephanie White brings a pedigree and experience level and just an overall coaching ability that Christy Sides probably was not at yet. I think it's important to note that the comparison I was just making 2 years ago, that's when the Fever hired Christy Sides. So the job that Stephanie White is being asked to do this year is dramatically different than the job that Christy Sides was hired to do 2 years ago. And I think it's important to have nuance with the coaching conversation. That is, look, I thought Christy Sides, especially after the difficulties right out of the gate, I thought she did a pretty good darn job last year. And I think she's going to be a really good coach in this league, and I think she'll get another head coaching opportunity. The dynamics just changed so dramatically, and you needed a coach who had the experience, who's been there, who's gone as a coach before to WNBA finals and coached veteran teams. The needs of the team just changed dramatically. And so I just think that's important to note. It wasn't so much Christy Sides wasn't viewed as a good coach. It was just what the Fever needed, frankly, are exactly, in my opinion, what Stephanie White is. The experience, the pedigree, when she talks, the locker room listens. And then, of course, she's got the Indiana tie. She's a former Miss Basketball. She played on the Indiana Fever. She was a coach and the head coach, in fact, on the 2015 run where they went to the finals and were a game away from winning the whole thing. And she comes back now at an interesting time, too, because back then she was sort of like Christy Sides. She was one of the up-and-coming coaches in the league, and now she comes in, I think, in a completely different spot. She has a lot more experience. She's coached the last two Connecticut teams to a lot of playoff success and a lot of regular season wins, and she had the job at Vanderbilt there for a few years. So I think Stephanie White will be the very first person to tell you that she's in a much better spot to coach this team now than maybe in 2015, which is saying a lot because she brought that team to the championship. But I think I think she's gained a lot of experience that will help with all of the spotlight that Caitlin Clark brings in, and I think she'll be a real asset for Clark in that regard.
The latest name added to the roster, Brianna Turner. I remember her at Notre Dame, but she's dealt with a lot of injuries, hasn't she? What role will she have with the Fever?
Yeah, I think she'll mostly be a backup center coming off the bench. If you look at the Fever's roster, I think before signing her, they had some questionable depth in the front court. And I think a player like Turner, you mentioned, really good player, standout at Notre Dame. She's had some injuries, and so I think a big question for her will be, if you look at some of her numbers a few years ago, she, in fact, made all WNBA defensive teams in back-to-back years. She's actually just one of 10 players currently playing in the WNBA that has made an all-defensive team twice in her career. So that tells you the defensive level that she was playing at. And I think, it's kind of a little bit of a bet from a Fever perspective that she can get back to that level. She won't be starting unless the Fever deal with injuries. But if you remember the Fever's run last year, once they were getting into serious playoff contention and in the playoffs, I thought their biggest weakness was just their depth in general. I mean, the level that Caitlin Clark was playing at, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell were playing at, they had plenty of top-level talent to compete with Connecticut. But where you really saw it was the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th players. And so I think that's where DeWanna Bonner and Natasha Howard are the big splashes. But the Sophie Cunninghams and the Sydney Colsons and the Brianna Turners of this free agency off-period portion of the season schedule, I think will be really important too, because I think the Fever have greatly improved their depth. But she will mostly be a backup big that will be asked to protect the rim and block shots.
Pat Boylan joining us here on the Sports Rush. Last night, Pacers start what we loosely call the second half after post-All-Star break, which, of course, it's only about a third of the season. But an impressive win over the Memphis Grizzlies, 127-113. First question I've got, Pat, and I looked at the box score. I wasn't able to watch the game, but I looked at the box score. And to be honest, I don't know if I would have even if I had it on my TV because I was locked into USA Canada, to be quite honest. But this game last night, look at the box score, and I guess my first question is, why didn't Edey play more? Did he get dinged up? Was there some reason that he only played 22 minutes? Because the numbers suggest that he should have been on the floor maybe a little more.
Well, this was a game that featured, frankly, a lot of whiplash. So the Grizzlies came out, Edey was playing, they were having a lot of success, and the Pacers made some adjustments. The three ball started falling. And, this is always going to be Edey's question in the NBA. I think he has answered every single of the preliminary level questions of, is this guy at bare minimum, and even as a rookie, a rotational NBA player, I think that answer is unequivocally yes. And I don't know that a lot of, whether it was draft people, analysts, whatever, I don't know a lot of people would have thought that would definitively be the case in his rookie year a couple years ago. So a lot of credit to him for that. But watching him go against Miles Turner is a fascinating battle because it's like watching a 1994 NBA center go against a 2025 NBA center. And so Turner kind of got going. And his challenge is going to be when players are bringing him out to the perimeter, all of a sudden he's got a lot more space to defend, and all of a sudden he's got, to come out away from the middle where he's so dominant. And it's when the Grizzlies can play the type of game where Edey's able to stay around the rim, he's really, really good right now. But I thought the Pacers did a really nice job of adjusting, getting him out of some of those comfort spots. And then the Pacers went from down 13 to up 26. And at that point, I think the Grizzlies felt like they had to mostly go smaller to try to mount a comeback. And to their credit, they almost did. They cut a 26-point deficit down to 4, but the Pacers held on. He's going to be a fascinating player for me to watch. I think just about everybody in the state, maybe say some IU diehards are rooting for him, including myself. He'll be a fascinating case because everything about his style says, I don't know that works in today's NBA, but he's proven, I think, already that it can and will work in the NBA. How successfully, how many minutes that looks like as his career continues, I think is still very much up in the air. But he stepped right out on the floor, and it technically was a 2-point shot, but he knocked down what essentially was a three-pointer really early in the game and looked really smooth doing it. And we're talking about an NBA three that's a couple feet behind that college line. So I think he's done a good job of adjusting there as well, and I'll be rooting for him.
If I'm judging this game by the box score, which is all I've got to work off of, Ja Morant was held in check, 4 for 15 and just 12 points last night. What was the key to the Pacers' defense on Ja?
Andrew Nembhard. It's not that simple, but I think Andrew Nembhard has developed into one of the NBA's better perimeter defenders. And he's done that to a few guys this year already. He had a great game against Steph Curry out in San Francisco. Just off the top of my head, he had a terrific effort against Cade Cunningham against the Pistons. He had a couple of them, in fact. I think he D'd up Damian Lillard when the Pacers had Nembhard available. So that's one thing from a Pacers perspective that's becoming, I think, really intriguing is he is turning into what I think is one of those guys that other teams don't want to have to face. And if you're a Pacers fan, you've got a guy, Nembhard's too small to put on those big wings, the 3-4 style of players. But against opposing point guards, the Pacers probably have their best weapon against those type of players since George Hill. And I think Nembhard's ceiling in that regard is even higher. And so it was a good defensive effort all around, but I found myself saying to Jeremiah Johnson midway through the third quarter, Morant has just looked pedestrian. He's had a couple of those explosive moves, but he isn't taking over. He didn't look the all-star, and I think Nembhard probably deserves the most credit for that. But I think in general, as the Pacers have kind of turned the calendar to 2025, they've been better defensively overall. And in the NBA, one guy doesn't stop any singular star. I thought it was just a really good effort overall in those times where Nembhard needed help providing it, but not losing other players on the floor.
This is the longest stretch of home games. They've got 4 in a row with the Clippers, Nuggets, and Raptors still coming into Cambridge.
And about time, because with 29 games to go in the season, which is where they were heading into last night's game, the Pacers had played the fewest home games and the most road games in the NBA. And the obvious positive of that is that that's going to end up even. And so this as you say, important to note, it's not the back half of the season. It's really the final third. You could argue that you're heading into the home stretch here pretty soon. You're going to have a lot of home games. And so really one of the biggest, if not the biggest, kind of big picture key to me for the Pacers here down the stretch is, can they be a good team at home? They don't have to be a great team at home, but can they be good at home? And if they do that, I think they're really going to like where they finish. Right now, they're in fourth in the Eastern Conference. If the season ended today, they'd have home court advantage in the first round. Long way to go there. Milwaukee's only a game behind. Detroit's only 2 games behind. But as you can start banking these games now, hopefully the thing that you can also do is put yourself in a spot that you're not needing the final day of the season to finish in that top 6. That's what they had to do last year, and we went down to the final day. And being in the top 6 keeps you out of that play-in tournament, which is so important because anything can happen there. So, this is a much-needed stretch of home games. 4 in a row, as you noted, 1 down. And then they go on the road for a game and come back for 2. So it's 6 of 7 out of the All-Star break at home, and we'll see if the Pacers can start solidifying their playoff spot if they can continue playing well at Gainbridge Fieldhouse.
Well, certainly an impressive start to that stretch, Pat, and appreciate you jumping on with us. Have a great weekend. Look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks for having me, Brett. Likewise.
Yep. Pat Boylan joining us here on the Sports Rush. Plenty of things to talk about college basketball. We'll do that next when we return. It's the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Welcome back to the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix 4 to 6. I am Brett Rump along with Adam Lundy, and just about ready to head out for the weekend. Of course, it's a busy weekend. Tonight we've got Mastodons basketball at the Gates Center. And I ran into a couple of people today who did not realize it was at the Gates Center. So I hope everyone is listening right now, especially if you're either driving home, getting ready to make a quick change of your attire before you head to the ball game tonight, or if you're on your way. I hope you know that the game tonight against Oakland for Purdue Fort Wayne is actually being played at the Gates Center on campus. That means free parking, cheap concessions. Tickets are only like $10. It's a bargain for Division I college basketball. Believe me, it's a great ticket. There's no bad seat. I mean, it doesn't matter if you get the general admission or reserve seat. It's not that big a difference. So come on out tonight and enjoy some Mastodons basketball. It's a big one against the Oakland Golden Grizzlies. And, of course, a lot of people, that was the Cinderella of the tournament last year.
Yeah, a lot of people recognize the name as they were the team that defeated Kentucky in the opening round of last year's tournament. And Jack Golke became a household name as he knocked down a whole lot of threes, 10 of them.
Do you know? I'll just give you a little bit of a quiz back to the spring.
All right.
When that Oakland Golden Grizzlies team had the upset of Kentucky. Do you know who hit the three-pointer that won it? Was it Jack Golke? Was it someone else?
I'm gonna take the field.
Smart man, because it's the only reason I would have brought it up, right?
Right. I mean, you're trying to throw me off here.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's kind of pointless because I would not have asked the question if it was the obvious answer. But actually, DQ Cole hit the game-winning three-pointer against Kentucky last year. DQ Cole's still part of the Oakland Golden Grizzlies roster. So,
awesome.
In fact, last year he had, I think, 21 points in the game here at the Coliseum when Oakland defeated the Mastodons. So, anyway, it should be a good one tonight, but it's a very important one because you look at the records of these two teams. The Mastodons are 11-6 in the Horizon League, and the Oakland is 9-7. If you do the math, it's basically a game apart because Oakland has the extra game to play. But going by the loss column, you've got the Mastodons with 6 losses, Oakland with 7. And so if the Mastodons want to control their destiny and stay out of that 6th spot, it's amazing. 2 losses, and they fall from 2nd to 5th, and they're one more game away from falling to 6th. Because then they wouldn't have the tiebreaker against Oakland because they'd have been beaten both games. So this is a very big game tonight. Very big game.
Huge game, and it's going to be a fun atmosphere, like you said, at the Gates Center. It's going to be a good crowd and should be a lot of fun Friday night. It
will be senior night. And so the Dons will be honoring some of the seniors, those that are finishing up their college careers, because, every roster, I think, still has a couple of seniors, and you're not sure if they're really seniors or if they're seniors that still have a year left. But we thought we got past that with COVID, and then they changed the rules about the JUCOs and stuff. So tonight we're going to have 3 players that will be recognized for senior ceremonies, Rashid Bello among them.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, a lot of serious contributors to the program going to be honored tonight, so that's a cool part of tonight's game, too.
And in case you missed it earlier, we were talking about Maria Marquesano's women's basketball team getting the win on the road last night. They jumped out to a big lead in the second quarter, and then were threatened somewhat early fourth quarter. In fact, I'll be honest, up to that point, the game had looked very much like Northern Kentucky's upset of Cleveland State, where Cleveland State had like a 12-point lead, a double-digit lead, and then Northern Kentucky stormed back by hitting some threes. Well, Northern Kentucky had a player, I think it was Calissa Lacey, but one of their guards hit 3 straight threes. And it went from being like a 16-point lead down to a 6-point lead. And all of a sudden, things were getting a little interesting with about 8 minutes left. But the Mastodons responded. They went on a little bit of a run of their own, opened up a double-digit lead, and eventually won it 69-57 over Northern Kentucky. And the Dons now have Detroit Mercy on Sunday, and that will be senior day for the women's basketball program.
Awesome. Yeah.
Now, that is going to be a long day.
Yeah.
They, Sydney Freeman and Lauren Ross, they came in as final year of eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got Amelia Bromenschenkel, who's been here 4.5 years.
Yep. Shout out to Bromo.
So it's going to be a long ceremony for the women on Sunday.
Definitely, but well-deserved and just an absolutely fantastic team this season.
Last night, did you enjoy the hockey, Adam?
No, you're going to be stunned to find out I was watching my New York Knicks in action.
Yeah, well, I'm not that stunned since we talked about it earlier. But just thought maybe.
No.
You were, misleading us earlier. But, yes, it was a big win for Canada coming from behind, beating USA. It actually was a game that was identical to the game they played over the weekend, except this time Canada was the team that was down by a goal, had to get it tied, then won it by 1. The USA had won 2-1. They were down 1-0. This one was a 2-1 score. Canada ties it. It goes to OT. And how the heck does Connor McDavid get that open?
Yeah, I did see the goal.
Yeah, I mean, wide open, just hanging in the slot. The one guy you cannot let have a clean look. And just a breakdown defensively by the USA, and they fall. But what did that game do for hockey?
It's a good question. Did it get you interested in hockey? Did it get any of our listeners more into hockey?
I mean, I love hockey, so it's hard to gauge with me. I'm not an all-star guy, but I will tell you I watched that game last night, and it shows you what a big winner the NHL was in the way things were revitalized over their all-star break, because this was what the NBA, I think, had dreamed they could create out of their little stupid round-robin game of rec basketball. They should have just called that "You Got Next" and played basketball like it was at the Y, because there was no point. But this was what it's about. Huge crowd, people buzzing, talking about it on social media. My wife was all into this game last night. And of course, I always use her as a reference because she is not the biggest sports fan, generally doesn't like watching sports on television, complains every time I try to do it. She will go to a sports game, right? But, she enjoys kind of the crowd watching, the people watching, but no, last night she was all into USA Canada. So I think it was great for the game.
Yeah, and I definitely think it was far more successful than any all-star game that the NHL could have put on. So definitely good job with the Four Nations Faceoff.
Before we get to break, I want to remind you, talked about this earlier, Indiana Tech at home tomorrow at the Schaefer Center, right on campus. You can enjoy some NAIA basketball right here in the Summit City, as Indiana Tech will be at home. Women start at 1, men at 3. And not that far away, St. Francis also at home tomorrow. They'll take on Spring Arbor, and same time, different place. They'll be at the Hutzel Center, and they'll tip the women's game at 1, the men at 3 against Spring Arbor. Again, what a fun battle they had with St. Francis and Grace on Wednesday night. The game that looked like Grace had in hand, and then USF gave it the big rally late, but just came up short. Couldn't quite get over the hump and take the lead. That was what they needed. Put the pressure on Grace.
Yeah, but definitely some awesome local hoops here in Indiana.
Yes, you got Mastodons tonight, men. And then tomorrow you got NAIA. You can take your choice, USF or Indiana Tech. Mm-hmm. And then on Sunday, you've got women's basketball at the Gates Center with Purdue Fort Wayne and the first place. I'll call them first place. They're not giving them credit for first place because they're a half game behind. They played one less game than Green Bay. But, you know, they both got one loss. To me, that's a tie for first. And so I'm going to call it that it's first place, Purdue Fort Wayne, taking on Detroit Mercy on Sunday afternoon at the Gates Center. We'll take a break. We come back. We got to wrap it up. It's about time for me to head to the Gates Center myself. It is the Sports Rush on Friday on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.
Producer Adam Lundy taking you home for our final segment of today's Sports Rush with Brett Rump as Brett makes his way to the Purdue Fort Wayne Mastodons Gates Center game tonight against the Oakland Golden Grizzlies. We'll have coverage of that game coming up in just 45 minutes with pregame starting at 6:45. Other than that, thank you to Pat Boylan of the Indiana Pacers and Indiana Fever for joining us in our second hour today. And thank you to Greg Rakestraw of the ISC Sports Network and IHSAA Champions Network for joining us in the first hour today. Don't forget, tomorrow, 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM brings you complete coverage of 2 girls semi-state games. It's the 2 3A morning games down at Huntington North at 10 o'clock. It'll be Norwell versus Delta. And at noon, it'll be Columbia City versus Highland. You've been listening to the Sports Rush with Brett Rump on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM.